If it's 1950, you are literally 5 years removed from the end of the Second World War. 4 or 5, depending on the theater. And most men have served in that war on one side or the other, or on one, not on one side or the other, but either in Europe or in the Pacific. Because the U.S. and Britain to an extent, but mostly the U.S. was kind of unique in fighting in both theaters at the same time
Mm-hmm.
and being equally active in both. And we were actually the primary, the United States Marines were the primary force in the Pacific. So most men have been off to war. What happens to men who come back from war and who have seen war and seen battle? Because the Second World War is a post-industrial war when your entire squadron is wiped out before you can process it. Right in front of you. You're patrolling through the woods. All of a sudden, machine gun fire breaks out. 7 men are dead in front of you in seconds. This is something that never happened in history, or very rarely happened in history before the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the guerrilla warfare has been around for a very, 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 very long time, and ambushes are a common thing, but it's that sort of thing ramped up to 100.
Mm-hmm.
You could even be in an active battle in a trench, fighting, there's back and forth. One mortar in the right spot, everybody but you is dead. And chances are, these are guys that you grew up with. These are guys that you knew. You knew them when they were kids. You remember when their first teeth fell out. You went to school together. You played together. You probably played soldier together, and now you actually are soldiers. You went to high school together, and you've just watched them all die brutally in front of you, blown to bits by mortar and shrapnel. You don't come back from that the same man.
Especially
Rare
since
is the man who goes to war and comes back the same.
Yeah.
And I have
And it
to
didn't
question
just
his
happen.
mental state before he left, if that's the case.
Yeah, very fair. Even in that
Modern war
situation with
breaks
the
men.
mortar in the trench, it doesn't just happen either, because there's all the lead up. You're training
Yeah.
with your friends. You're getting deployed with your friends. You're sitting in that trench with your friends for maybe weeks. And yes, this is more World War I than World War II, but who cares? The point's the same. Like, and even though you're trying to be brave, even though you're trying to defend your country, you know something like that's going to happen. Your squad's probably not the first squad to meet its end that way. So imagine the darkness ahead of time.
Yeah.
That then pays off.
There's that anticipation. And even if it didn't happen, that anticipation sticks with you. And that can even just eat away at your mind. And this can happen at any point in the war. It doesn't have to be like right at the start or right in the middle. It could be 2 weeks from the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And your commanding officer just came in and he said, "Oh, you know what? We're gonna be done. We're gonna march on Berlin, and then the war's gonna be over in about 2 weeks." Then when you're halfway there, you get in a firefight, and all of a sudden you're the only one alive. And then 2 weeks later, the war ends, and you can't help but think, what if I had done something different? Especially if you have any leadership position whatsoever. But so the dads in the 50s they have come home from that.
Yeah.
They are broken. Badly broken. But PTSD still goes virtually undiagnosed. It's basically still completely unacknowledged, except in the case of some Army doctors, or many Army doctors, and just in old Army tradition, that's like shell shock and battle fatigue are a thing.
Mm. But we just call it that.
It's
so
more like I feel bad for, like, we just kind of feel bad for the guy that has really bad shell shock.
Mm-hmm.
For the guy that dives for cover every time he hears a car backfire, because his brain has that instinctive reaction to a gunshot, to anything that sounds remotely like a gunshot.
And I don't know how they looked at that at the time, but if I try and put myself in their shoes and I say, okay, so my friend over there is all of a sudden just acting weird and he's distant and yeah, he's suffering from shell shock. He's seen the horrors of war. As have I, but I'm not suffering from it like he is, or whatever. I mean, if I don't understand that, how do I treat him? I
If
push him off to the side to an extent, or I push the thing off to the side to an extent
it,
because
it
that's the
isn't
only
it
way
isn't
to deal
even
with it.
just that, because most of the time, if you're devoted to somebody, you are going to do everything that you can for him. Because the guy that is shell shocked and can't speak anymore and can't really even function, somebody's probably going to take him in and take care of him. The problem is that institutionally there is no. It's basically just ignored.
No,
There's no, not even an attempt to do anything with it. Like, well, he's not quite the same, and every time we try to get him to talk about it, he just completely shuts down or he starts crying. So, we're just kind of gonna shove him off to the side. So we don't, because we don't want to have to deal with him, because we're trying to build a perfect society and there's no room in there for that. So, and then,
on some level, this is true. Yeah,
on television, everybody's perfectly put together. Um, so what happens with these men who are broken and who instinctively know that they're broken? They wake up every night, they're having horrible nightmares. Audie Murphy woke up having terrible nightmares, screaming in the middle of the night. So what do they do about it? They self-medicate. Alcoholism spikes. Might be sudden outbursts of violence because the war has turned you into a violent man. Philandering, which for those of you that don't really know what that word means, that means cheating. It's cheating on your spouse or some
oh,
combination of all those things.
I didn't know what that word meant either, but
That's what philandering, that means sleeping around.
okay then. Yeah, it's chasing pleasure to hide from pain. No,
And this ultimately just is the coping mechanism. And if you didn't do one of those, you probably had this mindset of, well, I just need to pull myself up by my bootstraps and suck it up and deal with it, which is kind of the mantra of the boomers when they look at any of the younger generations. Suck it up and deal with it.
we'll save that
And
rant for another day. But
when any generation
it's
brings
there
up a
for the
problem, an older generation says, suck it up and deal with it, which that should not at all be the reaction.
yeah.
But that's how they were raised. That's what they saw their fathers do. Dad had a problem, so he decided to suck it up and deal with it, but that is not possible. So what happens? He just kind of shuts down and checks out.
Mm-hmm.
And even for those who were not affected by war, for those who either didn't get drafted, didn't volunteer, or were medically excused because of flat feet or whatever, there are still some issues, because the the regular average Joe is now a guy that works in an office, or he works in a factory pulling a lever 150,000 times a day. And like, those are basically your two options for what an average regular guy is. You're like an insurance guy, you're a sales guy, you're a marketing guy, you have some office job that people are familiar with, kind of how the corporate world works these days. It was like the early days of that. And it's a daily grind of paperwork and chasing promotions. And office work is unsatisfying because it's not the kind of work that man was designed to do. A man was designed to toil. He was meant to use his mind. But office work isn't even intellectual work. It's just tedium. The man was meant to toil and labor. And the way you do that with your mind is wrestling with philosophy, the way Aquinas did, and science, and all of the intellectual disciplines. Not balancing the Johnson account, because there's no satisfaction in that. Like, imagine the satisfaction that a mathematician feels when or a physicist, we'll go with a physicist. Imagine the satisfaction that a physicist feels when he proves a theorem or discovers a formula that he has been looking for his entire professional career. And he has spent his days working with numbers and with experiments and with this and that and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he has given something to science. And then he can look at that A plus B equals C in front of him and say, I did that. And this is my offering to God and to the world. What of that is there in, oh, I balanced the Johnson account for this year. I'm going to have to do it again next year. Or time to go to the Anderson account at this point. Just move on to the next one.
Well, there's something to be said for keeping things in order so that other people can do their jobs.
There is.
And so in the type of office work that you're talking about specifically, like there still is value. And so I probably wouldn't go quite as far as you did with it, but the fact that it is tedious is definitely there. And you have to do with it. Yeah, the larger point I agree with.
But that is not something that a man who has spent 4 years with a gun in his hand can deal with.
That filter applied to it.
Add that on top of that.
That filter applied to it, that makes more sense. In a sense, it can be...
And also take a man in from the field and shove him in an office. Doing that. When instead of at the end of the summer, he can sit back on his front porch and look out at his field and look at the fruits of his harvest and say, what good I have done for my family, for my community. Instead, it's one thing after another. It is exactly the same thing every single day. You do exactly the same thing every single day. Oh, here's the Anderson account.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
I imagine
here's this contract we got to work on.
I imagine a couple scenarios. So take two broken men and put them in from the war and put them in that type of office job. And I can see one of them saying, and like one of them thriving there for a long time afterwards, just saying, okay,
finally he has
I don't know how
in his day to day.
Exactly. I don't know how to deal with this thing I'm dealing with, but I can at least do this. Plenty of things may suck about my life. I can at least do this. I can at least provide for my family doing it. Other flaws of the system notwithstanding. And you put the second guy in there, and he doesn't get the same sense of fulfillment out of it. And now he's stuck with a tedious job by himself, stuck with his thoughts. And we know what his thoughts are. That's hell. Like, that's actually a better description of hell in a sense, in its worst form, than a place of fire and brimstone. Imagine hell as the place of ultimate loneliness. So,
but I would say that the ratio is way different than the one you laid out. I wouldn't say that for every one man that served in the war found peace, one man was tormented. I would say a lot more were internally tormented than actually found peace because of that.
Yeah, I didn't set it forth actually as a ratio. So fair point. I have no idea how that shakes out.
And that's not really something we can do because most of them are not alive anymore to be interviewed.
Yeah.
But so on top of The Office, and I have other reasons why I don't, because even for the guy that might find peace there, you're away from your wife and kids for 8 hours a day. And yeah, there's the solace of I can go home to them at the end of the day, but then it's also, well, I just got to get up and leave them again tomorrow.
Exactly, which just ties back to what we've been talking about, the fracturing of the family and all this stuff. So
that's the offices. Factories are dangerous and the work is mind-numbing. Because there aren't a whole lot of safety regulations on machines. At this point, there's not lockout, tagout procedures or anything like that. So a lot of men risk getting seriously injured in the factory, and it's the same kind of thing. There's no satisfaction of a work done or a thing made when your job is to put a bolt in a hole over and over every day. Because this is what now society says you're good for, and that's all society says you're good for.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't do anything else. So how about you put a bolt in a hole all day long?
To echo a
And then
theme from our
again,
podcast, like,
add on the potential trauma from a war.
yeah,
Having had a gun in your hand all day and then watching probably your best friend die in front of you, and then it's this. And then that creeping thought in the back of your mind, this is all I'm good for.
mm-hmm.
It's not, oh, I'm doing this for my family so I can put food on the table. It's, this is all that I'm good for as a man. What is there for my children to look up to in me? Leo the 13th saw when the devil was let out of his cage.
And here we are talking about the century that he had. So
Again, the worst century in human history, the only one since the fall when the devil was out of his cage.
yeah, I had written this down as
Definitely
notes
the
to.
first time since redemption. The first time since the Passion of Christ that the devil had been out of his cage.
It's amazing how subtle he is. I had written this down to talk about actually later, like at the very end. But yeah, if you go step by step throughout all of the changes that happened, a lot of them, whether right or a lot of the decisions people made in response to those changes, in response to how society was moving, in response to all these disasters, whether the decisions were right or wrong, they're understandable.
Mm-hmm.
They're understandable reactions to a problem that is posed. Case in point, dropping the atomic bomb, not justifiable at all.
Yeah.
And yet, you can
Understandable
understand.
because we think that Japan isn't going to stop until we make them. It's
Exactly.
like these guys are literally hurling themselves at us, and they don't care at all about their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
They're diving in planes out of the sky at our ships because they do not care.
The United Nations, good idea? No. Did it seem like at the time that it was? Absolutely. We just came out of 2 world wars. We need peace. Like, that's all
NATO,
we
a
want. It's
good
just
idea?
peace.
No.
Good. Same thing with the move to the suburbs. Well, I mean, living in the city kind of sucks. We don't want to be in this ultra concentrated place. It'd be nice to have a nicer home. So let's go do that. Okay.
That
Seems
sounds
reasonable
perfectly
enough.
reasonable, and I don't have any issue with that.
Yeah.
And
But
again,
how
I
it's
don't
done.
necessarily have an issue with people who live in the suburbs. If you live in the suburbs, fine. You can pursue virtue no matter where you're at in life.
Exactly. But on a high level, there's a way to do that right and there's a way to do that wrong. And we've grown up in a world that is the product of it done wrong.
Yeah, it was an entire century of doing literally nothing right.